Let's take a fun look at a webtoon, stare at it with judgmental, crazy eyes, and maybe we'll all learn something new along the way. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? Hey, Walter here, doing what I can to make webtoons and comics easier because it shouldn't be overwhelming or daunting to tell your story. I make videos about making comics, so if that is something you're into, make sure you hit subscribe and like this video. This critique is simply my opinion and is more suggestions than prescriptions. There is more than one way to art, none of them any better or wrong than the others, just different. I will also mispronounce everything, so thank you very much. Now, today's creator submitted webtoon is Neptune Bay by AMAZE. The summary reads, after a bad breakup, Meg is living on her best friend's couch, desperate for change. When she finds a small farm on picturesque Neptune Island, she jumps at the chance to escape the big city, just like the characters in her favorite farming sim games. But quirky townspeople are harder to befriend in real life, and maybe the reason the farm is so cheap has something to do with the dead body in the river. A watercolor comic for fans of Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon. So this summary really cracks me up and I freaking love it. It's all, hey, Neptune Bay, it's all chill and relaxing. Oh yeah, dead bodies, and it's for fans of Stardew Valley, you know, if you like that kind of thing. And I'm all like, hey, that sounds cool. Wait, dead bodies? Whoa, did you just slip that in there like it's nothing? So great summary, you tell me what it's about. Meg is desperate for change. You also tell me the challenge, making friends, and oh yeah, that other thing, you know, dead bodies. And two, you give me a sense of the vibe of the comic by the way you mixed all that together. It's super solid. Now let's take a look at the story setup, which I think is also really strong. You give us insight into Meg's situation, her mental state, her goals, and you do all of that in the first chapter. And you do it in a very clear and straightforward way that just feels really honest, which is really great aspect of your writing just throughout the entire series. Through episode 2 and 3, you introduce another main character and you foreshadow the type of relationship that these two are going to have together. Also, you foreshadow the relationship Meg is going to have with the island itself through that exact same conversation. She thinks she has it all figured out, you know, that she doesn't need a jacket for the cold island weather. Little does she know, the pacing feels solid as well. You continue to progress the characters and their relationships with each new episode. You create new challenges for the characters every few episodes as well. I will say, after 29 episodes, I'm wondering when the dead body is going to show up. You have a really solid story without the dead body, so I'm not saying that you need it, just that I'm expecting it because of the summary, which makes me wonder where the story is going and if it has an endpoint. I'm not saying that it needs one. There are plenty of TV shows that go on for several seasons, and it's just showing us the lives of these characters over the years, so it's perfectly legit way of story. But, you know, at the same time, dead bodies. Sorry, I'm a murder mystery nut, so when I see dead body in a river, I grab my Scooby snacks, I grab my magnifying glass, and I strap in for the story. So this reaction may be more unique to my own expectations. Otherwise, you're doing a great job with character development. You've got a large cast of characters, and you've done a great job of making them their own unique persons. You start off with some classic character archetypes. It makes it easy for new readers to get to know this huge cast and get comfortable with them without being overwhelmed. From there, you can build your character into something unique. The challenge or the potential trap is that characters can become a little too cookie cutter, a little too one-dimensional, but you've got plenty of time to develop them. Your dialogue feels pretty authentic to me. It reads naturally. Sometimes it feels like characters are saying the things they are supposed to say, and they are moving the narrative. But I do feel like the dialogue could be a little more meshed together. There was this one scene where I thought you missed an opportunity. Brittany says, "Oh please, this place isn't that interesting. I'm sure you'll have heard everything worth knowing soon." Then some stuff goes down and Brittany's like, "I'm leaving," and then Meg's all, "But if you leave, who's gonna explain things to me?" If earlier Brittany was like, "You'll know everything worth knowing soon, and if not, I'll gladly give you the dirty details," then in the last panel, Meg would be like, "Well, if you leave, who's going to give me the details on this?" See, I love creating chains with my dialogue, like each line is another link in a chain, and they're all connected and working together, referencing each other. It creates like this dynamic to it. It's like lyrics to a song. One line of one verse is playing off another line, and then it all builds together in the chorus. So I'll often write dialogue, get further into the scene, and realize that if I rewrote an earlier line of dialogue, it would make this later dialogue have a lot more impact, whether dramatic or comedic. Now let's pop over to the art department and see what you did with your thumbnail. Joe looks a little crammed in here. I'd probably take him out and just zoom in on Meg so she fills up more of the available space. You could maybe play around with adding Joe back in there, maybe behind or to the side of Meg, but I don't really know if we need him. Now let's take a look at your comic art. I think your storytelling is pretty solid. You're establishing your locations, changing camera distance, the angles, you're keeping things interesting. You do have a tendency to have a very tight crop on all of your compositions though. We never really get to see the all of a thing. Example, in this scene, Meg is seeing the house for the very first time, and this is an important moment. This house started this entire adventure. So we should probably be able to see it in all of its glory. It's wonderfully run down, shabby shack, overgrown, spider-ridden glory. So instead of this panel, we could do something a little more like this. Create a panel for Meg's reaction. We see it through her eyes via her reaction before we actually get to see it. It sets the mood. Now we see the entire place. Then continue on like you did with these great close-up shots of the specific areas of glory. But you want to add one more because of the rule of three. Three makes a theme. Theme sends a message. So add one more panel and bam, bam, bam. So of course, not every location needs this much love and labor. For example, the grocery store, it's not super important and most readers will know what a grocery store looks like. So doing an establishing shot like this is more than enough. Give love to the locations that deserve it. That energy is going to be paid back in full because that is going to pull your readers in. Another example would be inside Meg's house and also on this overlook. Pulling the camera back to establish this location, I think would have a huge impact on just the entire mood of that scene. And a random thought, what would be really cool is, I have the map of the island. What if you made a map of the farm property, and then as Meg fixes up the property, you could update the map with the renovations. Like if she built a carrot patch where the tire graveyard used to be. Anyways, random thought over, moving along. One more thing about the camera setup, you tend to use this overhead camera angle a lot. Now, I personally try to avoid this angle as much as possible. I've mentioned it in other videos, but this angle is really hard to draw and to make it a good looking panel. The reason is because it takes a lot of work to make it look full of life and look real. You have to draw everything or it just feels empty. However, if you lower the camera, you don't have to draw as much, and bonus points, it tends to create a lot more depth, which pulls your reader in. They feel like they're in the panel versus being some kind of omniscient reader just looking down. My drawing of Tony's now might be counterintuitive to what I said earlier about cropping important locations, and if I was going to redraw this, I'd probably pull the camera a little further back and maybe even lower the camera more. Your character expressions read well and have a good variety. The poses you are doing, they read well and they're also very clear. I did notice you draw this downturned head pose often. Since you use it so much, I would suggest taking some reference photos of yourself and maybe practice drawing these on the side. You want to notice how the shoulders tilt and how they rotate along with just the general posture. You've done a nice job with your characters, making them all feel very distinct, but of the same world, besides those two characters who look exactly nothing alike. Of course, you're doing the watercoloring, which is crazy. I don't know if I'd have the guts to do that for a comic. A watercolor comic makes me super nervous, but it gives the comic a very unique and recognizable look. There's something I do want to suggest though, but not necessarily for you to implement into this comic. With watercolor coloring, you can set a mood with the colors you use, the shadows, the values, the overall hue of it. Now, if you're not already doing it, I would suggest painting from life. Maybe paint a movie still or take a picture of yourself in the moonlight or whatever, bright sunny day. Something moody The reason why I'm not sure I'd want to implement it into this comic is because painting like that is very time consuming, it takes a lot of work, and comics already take a lot of time on their own. And what you're doing right now works perfectly. However, I think if you were to push your painting skills to the limit outside of the comic, it would eventually start showing up in the comic without you having to do a lot of extra work from the start. I did notice in the early chapters that sometimes the lines would get a little blurry or washed out, but it seems like you've corrected that in the newer episodes, which is great. All right, let's move on to everyone's favorite, or maybe just my favorite, lettering. Yay! It looks like you've improved your lettering a lot over the course of all of your episodes, so I'm only gonna look at your most recent episodes for your lettering. The balloon shape you have is pretty good, but if you made it a little bit more squat, it would fit the lettering around the corners a bit better, which should also have a little bit more space. You want the space between the balloon and the letters to have at least a letter widths apart. Your balloon tails feel a little too thin or maybe a little too talon-like, and there's a slight inconsistency from one to the next. I've done videos on making good balloons in Clip Studio and Krita, and it's pretty easy once you learn how to do it in any program. And then for another example, this is how I would letter this panel. Because your artwork is so natural and has a lot of texture, I would almost suggest doing a more organic balloon. Maybe not the hard black and white, maybe an off-white with a medium to medium dark line. And if you can grunge up the edge, that would be even better. Try to stay away from these really long balloon tails and the connecting tails. You tend to put a lot of space between two connected balloons. The closer, the better, for aesthetics. Of course, do whatever you have to for the best storytelling. Try to create a flow with the direction of the tails and the connectors so that it all flows together. Your balloon connectors should be curved, for consistency and flow. If you feel like you have too much dialogue, you should reuse some of your panel art. Case in point, the second dialogue from the mom is kind of shoved in here. It would be a lot more elegant if you did it this way instead. And here's another example of thinking about placement and the direction and flow of your balloon tails. So the length and the shape of your lettering lines is pretty good. Just a few times you could have had a little bit better format shape. Also, watch out for those crossbar eyes on non-pronoun words at the start of your sentences. You don't want to be using those. Okay, that's Neptune's Bay by Emmy Pax. This was a requested critique by the creator of the comic. I do not offer unsolicited critiques because I don't think it's cool to force my thoughts on someone who may not be in a place to process my intrusion on their mental state and their well-being. The link to the comic is in the description. Check the comic out, give it 10 stars, leave them a comment like "you great" and give it some hearts. It's the nice thing to do since they willingly sacrificed their comic just so we could all learn some stuff. If you want me to review your comic, check out my Patreon page. You can also get access to my secret Discord where you can find help, share your art and your journey. And I also do mentorships and portfolio reviews on Patreon. And if you want to keep making comics easier, be sure to like, link, love, hug, and hit that sub button for more sweet, sweet goodness. Draw like no one's watching, except you. You should probably look at what you're drawing. Catch you in the next video. Peace!